4 chilling babysitting stories you should never read alone. Welcome to DTC, the place of the brave, where we uncover the chilling truths behind seemingly ordinary jobs. Tonight, we bring you 4 terrifying babysitting tales, stories that start with a routine evening and end in unexplainable horror. These are the kinds of accounts that make you question every shadow, every sound, and every passing moment when you're left alone at night. So turn down the lights, find a safe place to sit, and prepare yourself for 4 babysitting stories so haunting you might not make it through the first one. You think babysitting is just about keeping kids safe, but what if the real danger is what's lurking outside, or even closer than you'd ever imagine? These true accounts will test your courage and leave you questioning what's real. Are you ready to face the darkness? Story 1. The Babysitter at the Hamiltons' Farmhouse. I never thought that one night could change the way I looked at every creak, shadow, or phone call again. But Halloween at the Hamiltons' farmhouse wasn't like any babysitting job I'd ever taken before. The place had its own gravity, an oppressive atmosphere that weighed down on you the moment you crossed the threshold. Standing in the foyer, I couldn't help but notice how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, but heavy, loaded quiet, as if the house was holding its breath. The kids, Megan, Ryan, and Max, didn't seem to notice anything was off. They were just excited to stay up a little later, eat their Halloween candy, and watch movies. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't the only ones in the house. The farmhouse had a strange layout. The main living area stretched out like a giant L shape, with hallways that seemed to go on forever. The wood-paneled walls felt closer than they should, almost claustrophobic, and the few decorations on the walls, old black and white family photos, watched every move I made. The kitchen was at the far end, and when I turned on the light, it flickered once before staying on, casting long, jagged shadows. I busied myself making popcorn while the kids sat in front of the TV, giggling and playfully arguing over which movie to watch first. I tried to focus on them, to remind myself that I was the adult here. If I was nervous, they'd pick up on it. But then the landline phone rang. It startled me so badly that I nearly dropped the popcorn. The phone was old, one of those rotary dial models that felt heavy in your hand. I picked it up, more annoyed than frightened. Hello? There was no answer, just a long, ragged breath. Hello? I repeated, louder this time, my voice breaking slightly. Still no answer, just breathing. Then a faint chuckle, a low, gravelly sound that sent a chill down my spine. I hung up quickly and stared at the phone. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe it was nothing. I forced a smile when I brought the popcorn out to the kids, but my hands were trembling so much that the bowl rattled. The kids didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. Megan, the oldest at 10, was absorbed in the movie. Ryan, 7, was already half asleep on the couch, and Max, the youngest at 4, was happily munching on candy. I told myself to relax. It was just a stupid phone call. The phone rang again. This time I didn't rush to answer it. I just stood there staring at it, my stomach twisting. It rang 3 times before I finally picked it up. "Who is this?" I said, trying to sound firm, though my voice was shaking. Nothing, just the sound of someone breathing, closer now, more deliberate. It was almost as if they wanted me to hear it. I slammed the phone down and backed away. I needed to focus on the kids. I told them it was just a wrong number, trying to keep my voice light, but I could tell Megan didn't buy it. She looked at me for a long moment, her big brown eyes searching mine, before turning back to the movie. When the third call came, I didn't answer it. I let it ring until it stopped. That was when the power went out. The sudden darkness hit like a wave, and the silence that followed was deafening. No hum of the refrigerator, no static from the TV, just an overwhelming, all-consuming silence. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting weakly through the darkness. "It's okay," I called out, hoping I sounded reassuring. "I'll go check the breaker box." I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and headed to the basement door. It felt colder now, the air heavy and damp. I pushed the door open, the old hinges groaning loudly, and shone the light down the stairs. At the bottom, the concrete floor glistened as if it had just rained indoors. I crept down slowly, each step feeling like it took forever. The walls were bare and rough, and the light caught strange shapes that seemed to shift when I looked directly at them. When I reached the bottom, I noticed the footprints. They were muddy, large, and recent, leading from the open basement window to the stairs. My mouth went dry. I froze, straining my ears for any sound. For a long moment there was nothing. Then, faintly, I heard it, a creak from above, as if someone was walking across the floorboards. My first instinct was to run, but the kids were upstairs. I couldn't just leave them. I forced myself to move, step by step, back up the stairs. The footprints seemed to get clearer the higher I went, as if whoever left them had just been here. By the time I reached the top, my breathing was shaky, and my hands felt clammy. The kids' voices were muffled behind their bedroom doors, but I could hear them whispering. At least they were okay. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. My voice trembled as I explained what had happened, the prank calls, the power outage, the footprints. The dispatcher tried to keep me calm. "Stay on the line," she said. "Officers are on their way." But as I waited, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were coming from just outside the kitchen. The floor creaked slowly, deliberately. I turned off my flashlight and held my breath. The darkness felt like it was closing in, wrapping around me. Every small sound, the wind outside, the shifting of the house, felt amplified. I strained my ears, and then I heard it again, a low, almost inaudible laugh, followed by the faintest scrape of a shoe against the wooden floor. When the police arrived, their flashing lights cut through the oppressive darkness like a beacon. They searched every inch of the house but found no one. The muddy footprints stopped at the front door, as if the intruder had simply vanished. One of the officers looked at me with a grim expression. "You're lucky you called when you did," he said. But he wouldn't elaborate. The kids, still shaken, clung to me as I tried to reassure them that everything was fine now. But I knew it wasn't. Something had been in that house, something that left no trace but fear. And even after the officers left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2, title, The Petersons' Countryside Babysitting Job. I never thought that one night of babysitting could turn into something I would remember for the rest of my life. The Petersons lived in a small, secluded house outside Nashville, surrounded by fields that stretched endlessly into the night. It sounded perfect, a quiet countryside gig watching over their little girl Lily and their protective German shepherd Rufus. What could go wrong? Lily, just 3 years old, had been put to bed, and the house had grown still. I settled into the cozy living room, a worn paperback in hand, the kind of night I had hoped for, peaceful, uneventful. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees, and the faint chirping of crickets set a tranquil backdrop. But then Rufus, lying quietly near the window, stiffened. His ears pricked up, his glossy black coat seeming to bristle as a low growl rumbled from his chest. I glanced up from my book. At first I saw nothing, only the darkness beyond the glass. Trying to reassure myself, I muttered, "Just the wind." Rufus, however, wasn't convinced. He rose to his feet, his large frame tense, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. His growling grew louder, more insistent. That was when I first caught sight of it, a faint, shadowy figure moving at the far edge of the yard. My heart skipped a beat. Someone was out there, weren't they? The rational part of my mind tried to reason it away. Perhaps it was a neighbor, maybe someone who took a wrong turn on the country road. Yet, as I squinted through the glass, the figure didn't move like someone lost. It seemed deliberate, purposeful, lingering just out of clear sight. Rufus's growls turned to sharp barks, his tail stiff, his body pressed close to the door. I could feel the tension rising, both in him and in myself. I forced myself to stay calm, but my fingers fumbled as I set my book down and approached the window. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice steady despite the unease creeping through me. No answer, just the wind, the crickets, and a faint sound that didn't belong. A soft tapping, deliberate and slow. I turned toward the source and felt a chill. It was coming from the side window. The tap, tap, tap wasn't random. It was steady, deliberate, like someone wanted to make their presence known but didn't want to be seen. "Stop it," I whispered to myself. "It's nothing." But I couldn't look away. I inched closer to the window, Rufus now pressed against my side, his body warm and solid yet tense as a coiled spring. I reached for the curtain, hesitating before pulling it back. The yard looked empty, no shadow, no figure, no movement. Yet the sense of being watched hadn't faded. Rufus barked sharply, breaking the silence. I jumped, feeling a cold sweat trickle down my neck. My phone was in my pocket. My hand was trembling as I pulled it out, my fingers brushing against the screen. I should call someone. I should call the Petersons, the police, anyone. But as I glanced back at the window, something glinted in the moonlight. A faint reflection, or perhaps a pair of eyes. My stomach turned. I hit the speed dial. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the police arrived. By the time their lights washed over the yard, the shadow was gone. They searched the perimeter, found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. "It was probably just the dog overreacting," one of them suggested, but I knew what I saw. I knew what Rufus sensed. Someone, something had been there. After they left, the house was quiet again, too quiet. I didn't sit down. I didn't read. I spent the rest of the night by Lily's crib, with Rufus lying vigilantly beside me, his head resting on his paws but his eyes never leaving the door. I didn't sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever had been out there might come back. Looking back, I still don't know who it was or why they came. Maybe it was a drifter, maybe someone with bad intentions, or maybe it was something else entirely, something I'd rather not think about. All I know is that Rufus, with his sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty, kept us safe that night. And even now, the memory of those faint taps on the window, that shadow moving just out of reach, still lingers in the back of my mind, making the darkness feel just a little more sinister. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3. The Ghostly Friend of Charlie. It was a warm, still evening when I first stepped into the Smiths' quaint little home. The golden hour sunlight poured through the windows, lending the living room a honeyed glow, but there was something about the silence that felt heavy. At first I thought it was just nerves. After all, it was my first time babysitting for them. Charlie, the boy I was watching, was polite enough, though a little reserved. He sat cross-legged on the rug, fiddling with a puzzle, his soft brown hair flopping into his eyes. He was about 6, maybe 7. Just the two of us for the night, in this creaky old house, surrounded by a yard full of tangled trees. What could go wrong? "Do you want me to help with that?" I asked, leaning against the arm of the couch. "No thanks," Charlie said, his voice light but distracted. "I'm waiting for Grandpa." I hesitated, my smile faltering. "Oh, is he coming over tonight?" I had met Charlie's parents briefly before they dashed out. They hadn't mentioned anything about a grandfather stopping by. Charlie shrugged, not looking up from his puzzle. "He's always here." The words gave me pause, but I quickly chalked it up to a kid's overactive imagination. "Well, if Grandpa shows up, let me know, okay?" Charlie finally looked at me, his expression oddly solemn. "You'll know. He likes to stay quiet, but sometimes he watches." An uneasy laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "That's interesting, Charlie. Well, I'm here too, so no worries." The evening carried on as you might expect. Dinner was a simple plate of spaghetti, and Charlie, still quiet, ate without much fuss. Afterward, I let him pick a show on the TV while I scrolled through my phone, occasionally glancing over to make sure he wasn't getting into trouble. The shadows from the backyard trees danced on the walls as the sun dipped lower, and the house's cozy warmth seemed to wane with the light. When it was time for bed, Charlie went upstairs without protest. I tucked him in, his little face illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight. "Good night, Charlie." "Good night," he murmured. Then, just as I turned off the light and started to close the door, he said, "If Grandpa comes, just let him do what he wants. He doesn't like to be bothered." The words sent a shiver up my spine, but I forced a smile. "Okay, Charlie, good night." I closed his door, retreating to the safety of the living room. The house was quiet now, eerily so. I tried to convince myself that Charlie's remarks were just the innocent ramblings of a young child. Kids made things up all the time, but something about the way he spoke of his grandpa stuck with me, the way he seemed so certain, so matter-of-fact. An hour passed. I was scrolling aimlessly on my phone when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper coming from upstairs. I froze, listening. The TV was off, and the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then I heard it again, clearer this time, a low, gravelly voice coming from Charlie's room. I got up slowly, every step on the hardwood floor seeming too loud. I held my breath, creeping up the stairs, my heart pounding. At the top of the staircase, I hesitated. Charlie's door was slightly ajar, just as I had left it. Through the crack, I saw the faint glow of his nightlight. "Charlie," I whispered, "are you okay?" No answer. I inched the door open, just enough to peek inside. Charlie was fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling evenly. The room was still, but the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I could have sworn I'd heard something, a man's voice. It had been so clear. Shaking my head, I closed the door gently and went back downstairs, telling myself it was my imagination. I settled onto the couch, but the unease didn't leave me. The shadows in the backyard seemed darker now, more menacing. The tangled trees swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then came the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not from upstairs this time, but from the backyard. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly I rose and moved to the window. I could barely make out a shape, a tall, looming figure standing just beyond the edge of the light. My stomach churned as I tried to focus on it, but it was as if the shadow itself was shifting, refusing to stay still long enough for me to understand what I was seeing. I stepped back, heart hammering. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. "Grandpa doesn't like to be bothered," Charlie's voice echoed in my mind. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling, and considered calling Charlie's parents. But what would I say? That their son's grandpa was outside even though he was supposed to be long gone? That I was spooked by shadows and whispers? The figure outside shifted again, stepping closer to the window. I gasped, stumbling backward, but when I looked again, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me jump. I stayed awake, perched on the edge of the couch, waiting for the first light of dawn to break through the windows. When it finally did, the suffocating weight in the air seemed to lift, as if whatever presence had been lingering there had left with the darkness. When Charlie's parents returned, I didn't mention the voice or the shadow. I just smiled and said everything had gone smoothly. But as I left, Charlie gave me a small wave and said, "Grandpa says you're a good babysitter." The words sent one last chill down my spine. I nodded and quickly walked to my car. As I drove away, I told myself I'd never come back. Whatever had happened that night, it was something I didn't want to experience again. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 4. The Watcher in the Shadows. It all started on a sticky, sweltering summer evening, the kind where the air felt thick and heavy, and even a slight breeze barely stirred the oppressive heat. I was babysitting Mia, a quiet and imaginative little girl who lived in a modest apartment on the second floor of an old, unassuming building. The neighborhood was quiet, a little too quiet, perfect for those looking to escape the noise of the city. Mia's parents had left for the evening and she had gone to bed early. Everything seemed normal, almost boring. I settled into the plush, well-worn armchair in the living room with a book, looking forward to a peaceful few hours of reading while Mia slept soundly in the next room. It was nearly an hour later when I noticed something unusual. At first, it was nothing more than a fleeting shadow, a movement at the edge of my peripheral vision. I brushed it off, thinking it might have been a car passing outside or the leaves of a tree rustling in the dim streetlight. But as the moments ticked by, the shadow seemed to remain. I tried to focus on my book, but my eyes kept drifting back to the window. The curtains were drawn just enough that I could make out the faint outline of someone standing outside. The figure didn't move, didn't walk away. He was simply there, watching. A chill ran down my spine. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor stepping outside for a smoke or someone looking at their phone. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This person was facing directly toward the window, unmoving. My chest tightened. I started to notice the little details, how the figure was tall and lanky, his silhouette illuminated just enough by the dim street lamp to make out the sharp angles of his frame. He wore a dark jacket, and his head tilted slightly to one side, as if he were listening for something. I thought about closing the curtains completely, but something about that idea made me hesitate. If I moved too abruptly, I might catch his attention. I tried to act natural, pretending to read, though I couldn't stop glancing over. Every time I looked, he was still there. The same pose, the same unnatural stillness. I tried to calm myself, reasoning that it wasn't unusual for someone to stop for a moment outside an apartment building. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or maybe he was lost. But the longer he stayed, the harder it became to convince myself that this was anything but deliberate. This man was standing there for a reason. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled creaks of the old building settling. My hands felt clammy as I gripped my phone. I didn't want to panic, but every instinct was screaming that something wasn't right. I typed out a message to Mia's parents, hesitated, then deleted it. What was I supposed to say? That some random guy was standing outside watching the window? They would just tell me to call the police, and I didn't want to overreact. Not yet. And then he moved. It wasn't much, a slow, deliberate step forward. His head tilted again, this time slightly higher, as if trying to see through the glass. My breath caught in my throat. I could see more now, his face partially illuminated by the street lamp. His features were sharp, almost gaunt, with deep shadows under his eyes that made him look hollow. His mouth was set in a crooked line, not quite a smile, but not entirely neutral either. It was the kind of expression that made my skin crawl, like he was amused by some joke I couldn't hear. He took another step closer, his movements slow and measured. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I told myself not to look, not to acknowledge him, but my eyes were drawn to him like a magnet. His gaze never wavered. He didn't glance around. He was fixated entirely on the window, on me. I fumbled with my phone and dialed 911. The operator answered calmly, but my voice was shaking as I tried to explain what was happening. "There's a man outside. He's just standing there, staring at the window. He's been here for a while and he's getting closer." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremor was unmistakable. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but every passing second felt like an eternity. I glanced at Mia's door to make sure it was still closed. She was safe, at least for now. The man reached the base of the building now, his face almost pressed against the glass. I could see the outline of his features, dark, sunken eyes, skin that looked almost waxy under the harsh light. He raised a hand slowly, pressing it against the window pane. The glass fogged slightly under his breath. I felt frozen, unable to move or even look away. When the sound of sirens finally broke the silence, it was like a spell had been lifted. The man turned his head slightly toward the approaching noise, then stepped back into the shadows. He didn't run or hurry, he simply melted into the darkness, leaving no trace that he'd ever been there. Moments later, the police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the night. They searched the perimeter and found what I'd feared, signs of tampering at the back window. The officers didn't find the man, though, and after a thorough search, they concluded that he'd fled the scene. Mia's parents returned home soon after, apologetic but grateful that nothing worse had happened. They promised to install security cameras immediately, and while their assurances were kind, they did little to calm the unease that had settled deep in my gut. The image of the man's face, his empty eyes, and that eerie half-smile stayed with me long after the incident. Even now, I can't sit by a window at night without feeling the weight of unseen eyes. I can't help but wonder, who was he, and why was he there? As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave now, and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the place of the brave are always waiting, and they never rest. Good luck sleeping tonight.